A man whose crime was so infamous he had a Netflix docuseries about it called American Nightmare was recently sentenced to life in prison multiple times because he just confessed to additional atrocious crimes he committed throughout his life, one having occurred when he was just 16 years old. Today we're going to dive into a story that starts in 1993 and, through a series of insane twists and turns, eventually leads us all the way to July 10th of 2025.
The disappearance of 29-year-old Denise Huskins seemed like a case of real-life Gone Girl.
Our investigation has concluded that none of the claims has been substantiated.
Now, I know I just said that the story starts in 1993, and it does, but I'm going to take us to 2015 first, or I'm going to put us in 2015 first. And the reason being is because without the 2015 crime, I don't think we ever would have figured out the 1993 crime. And so it's important to start there. In addition, the 2015 crime is one of the most mind-bending situations I have ever heard of. On March 22nd of 2015, Aaron Quinn and Denise Huskins ordered pizza to Aaron's house and stayed up until 12 in the morning discussing their relationship. Now, both Denise and Aaron were physical therapists, and they actually met in a hospital through their job. The relationship seemed great, except for one small wrinkle. Aaron had recently broken up with his fiancée after finding out she was cheating on him, and that ex-fiancée worked in the same unit as both Denise and Aaron, which is pretty awkward. But what's worse is that Denise actually found text messages in Aaron's phone where he admitted to still having feelings for his ex and said he wanted to work it out with her. Yikes. Obviously, Denise was pretty upset about this, which warranted this pizza night in on March 22nd, a deep conversation and maybe some self-reflection on both sides. After their talking, they went to bed, but in the early hours of March 23rd, they were abruptly awoken by a bright light being shown in their face, the sound of a stun gun, and multiple people dressed in black standing around their bed. These people called Denise and Aaron by their names, said it was a robbery, used zip ties to restrain them, put blacked out goggles on them, and forced them into the closet. The robbers also put headphones on them, handed them a vial with diazepam and NyQuil in it, and then a pre-recorded message played over the headphones telling them to drink the drugs or else it would be injected into them, and they'd face physical punishment or electric shock. The robbers then separated Denise and Aaron and shoved Denise into the trunk of a car. They then took Aaron downstairs to the kitchen and, in an obvious attempt to scare the absolute shit out of him, told him they knew everything about him, where he worked, where he grew up, his entire history as a child, all of it. And they then instructed him to keep his line open and that they would be in contact with him with a series of tasks, and that in order to get Denise safely returned, Aaron had to pay them $15,000. Aaron then gave him his banking information, access to his email, and his laptop. After that, Aaron passed out from the drugs and woke up on the floor to find, sitting next to him, a change of clothes and a scissors so he could cut himself free. What courteous kidnappers. Well, except for the fact that he also saw an email sent from his Comcast account to his Live account demanding two payments of $8,500. There was a period of time where Aaron was terrified to do anything. There was red tape on the floor surrounding him, and he had been instructed not to step outside of it. In addition, the robbers had placed a camera in the corner of the room pointed at him. He had been told they were watching him, and that he must follow instructions carefully. For a while, for fear of getting Denise killed, he tried to wire the robbers money and didn't contact authorities. Eventually, though, he said, "Fuck this," and called his brother, who was in the FBI, asking for help. His brother instructed him to immediately call 911. Which he did. The cops arrived and swept the house and noted a number of red flags that caused them to question Aaron's story. First, the house had recently been cleaned. It smelled strongly of cleaner, as if it had just been cleaned that morning. Second, there was blood on the mattress where Aaron and Denise had been sleeping. Third, Aaron had called 911 10 hours after Denise was kidnapped. Fourth, Aaron had Denise's phone. And fifth and final, Aaron's car was missing. To the police and detectives on the case, this looked like a typical "the boyfriend did it" situation. And not only did the scene seem odd, but what happened the night before didn't help Aaron's case. He was texting his ex? He wanted her back? Denise found out and confronted him? It seems like there was a motive for some nefarious activity on Aaron's part.
I had been talking to my ex, and at that time, when I was still dating Denise.
Was there tension in the relationship? Was she mad?
She's upset.
Concerned?
Okay.
Is she cheating?
No, well, she felt that emotionally that was cheating in some sense.
I mean, did she like discover something?
Well,
I mean, was she like going through your phone and like, you know, what the hell is
she
this?
went through my phone.
What'd she find?
Found text messages that.
What did it say?
That me saying I still cared, that I want to work things through with her.
On top of that, he took a polygraph test, and according to the detectives, he failed it miserably.
All right, Aaron, there's no question in my mind that you failed this test. And you failed it miserably. It's not even close.
I did not do anything.
Okay.
I did.
I'm pretty sure maybe you did. Maybe you didn't do anything. Maybe something happened to her that you didn't plan. I don't know. You tell me. But it can't start with 3 guys showing up at the house taking her away. That's not what happened. You know where she is.
I don't know where she is.
The police and detectives continued to grill Aaron, convinced he was guilty of murdering his girlfriend, and Aaron was under immense pressure, but did not change his story once. Eventually, Aaron demanded a lawyer and he was released. Shortly after, to the authorities' surprise, a crime reporter at the San Francisco Chronicle, Henry Lee, received an email from Aaron's email account. The email had a voice recording on it. It was Denise.
My name's Denise Huskins, and I'm kidnapped. Otherwise, fine. Earlier today, there was a plane crash in the Alps. 150 people died. And one thing that not many people know about me is that I went my first concert with Bethany and her mom to Blink-182, Bad Religion.
This is considered proof of life, proof that Denise was alive, and Henry passed it on to the police. The police then asked Aaron to come back to the station and send a message from his phone to the kidnappers. When Aaron got to the station, he realized the police had put his phone on airplane mode and just left it like that. So, although the kidnappers had told Aaron to keep his line open, and I'm assuming he told the police that because it's a kidnapping and he was concerned about Denise, they put it on airplane mode anyway. I guess because they were already so convinced Aaron killed Denise, they couldn't imagine anyone would ever actually try to get a hold of Aaron. But lo and behold, once Aaron turned it on, he had missed multiple calls and texts from the kidnappers. They'd been trying to get a hold of him the entire time. Now, because of this voice recording, the police started moving their attention away from Aaron and focusing on Denise. In their minds, things weren't adding up. Why did Denise sound so calm in the voice recording? Why is everything about this kidnapping so weird? Would Denise have a reason to demand money from Aaron? Is this a scorned lover situation, Denise orchestrating a kidnapping to try to get back at Aaron for still being in love with his ex-fiancée? The questions are endless, and the police their wheels kept turning, and their blinders stayed on. Now comes March 25th, only 2 days since the kidnapping, and Denise suddenly appears in Huntington Beach, California, which is over 6 hours away from Vallejo. Apparently, she had been dropped off by the kidnappers right by her mother's house. Very convenient. She was taken to the police station and questioned. She told them she was put in a trunk, was knocked unconscious by the drugs, and woke up in the bedroom of a quiet house. She was zip-tied to the bed wearing blacked-out goggles, and she said there were multiple kidnappers. Apparently, they released her in Huntington Beach because they wanted to drop her off away from the crime scene and because they saw on her driver's license that she used to live there. When she was dropped off, her mom wasn't home, so she walked to her dad's, saw her dad's gardener, and asked to use the phone and call 911 with it. When asked whether she was sexually assaulted, she initially said she was not. And then, regarding the kidnappers in general, she said, "All things considered, they treated me really nicely." Denise later elaborated on her captivity. It seems she mainly interacted with a single kidnapper, despite believing there were 2 others. She noted that this kidnapper had been in the military and had served in the Middle East. She saw him as intelligent and socially awkward. He had told her he'd entered Quinn's house 5 times in the months preceding the break-in, and even stood outside the bedroom door when Huskins was over at one point. He also informed Denise that she was not the intended target. In actuality, he'd been going for Aaron's ex-fiancée and was unaware they had broken up and Aaron had started dating someone new. Denise also mentioned he had supplied her with toiletries, served her pizza and wine on a formal place setting, and at one point held her as she cried. When he let her go, he apparently said, "I wish we would have met under different circumstances. You are an incredible person." Here's the thing. The police were not buying it. kidnappers treated her nicely. They happened to drop her off right by her parents' house. She had said when she was dropped off, she had ripped duct tape off herself. But when the police went to the scene, they didn't find any duct tape. On top of that, they questioned the gardener, and he said Denise had seemed very normal, not upset when she requested to use the phone. The police department concluded this was a staged kidnapping, and the media instantly lit up with this, calling it a hoax and calling Denise the real-life Gone Girl.
Bombshell tonight, live to Vallejo. Is she a real-life gone girl who demands thousands in ransom after a dramatic kidnap? Police get a frantic call that gorgeous 29-year-old physical therapist Denise Huskins kidnapped from upscale Vallejo suburbs, but after a ransom demand for thousands of dollars and then a voice recording believed to be Denise herself as proof of life. Police now wondering, is Huskins a real-life gone girl like the movie who fakes her own kidnap for ulterior motives?
Now, Denise and Aaron were aghast by these accusations. Denise specifically was upset because she'd been telling the detectives certain key pieces of information that the kidnappers had told her specifically not to repeat. Like, for example, the fact that she actually had been sexually assaulted twice on camera with the intent of using the footage as blackmail, or the fact that one of the kidnappers had let slip that he had been in the Marines. What's also interesting is that the cops offered both of them immunity in hopes that they would flip and tattle on the other, but neither took it. They stood strong in their story. Now, the reporter, Henry Lee, who initially got the voice recording, soon got another email from huskins.kidnapping@hotmail.com, and here's what it said. I speak for the group that kidnapped Miss Huskins. We are a group of what I suppose you would call professional thieves, though we have not been doing it that long and don't identify ourselves as such. We are more than 2 and fewer than 8 in number. All but one of us hold at least bachelor degrees, including from your alma mater. Miss Denise Huskins was absolutely kidnapped. We did it. We will provide incontrovertible proof of that, and the Chronicle will break it. We will not turn ourselves in nor reveal our identities. Even after we come out, we don't think there will be any link allowing the police to identify us. But it is still risky, and as things stand now, we could apparently get away with anything. We'd rather take the chance of revealing the truth than live in a world where someone like Denise Huskins is victimized again and again. We have no prior link to Miss Huskins and did not know who she was until the night of the operation. We believe the woman there was Aaron's ex. The bottom line, inconceivable as it sounds given what we have already done, is that we didn't really want to hurt anyone. We are young adults, fairly recent college graduates, and up until now, this was a bit like a game or movie adventure. We fancied ourselves a sort of Ocean's 11 gentlemen criminals who only took stuff that was insured from people who could afford it. The horrifying reality of what we had become and what we were doing did not set in until being confronted directly with Denise Huskins' suffering and humanity. We now feel like the pieces of shit we have become, and though we don't have the courage to turn ourselves in and spend the rest of our lives in prison, we will not stand by and see the life of a really good person ruined. And that whole email is crazy. Okay. Then, 2 days later, another email arrived. This one was 10,000 words long, and once again, they said they regretted their actions, admitted to kidnapping her for ransom. They admonished the police for attacking the victims, talked about being college-educated kids, and sent a ton of photos of items used in the break-ins as proof that this wasn't a hoax, but rather a real crime. The crime reporter, understandably, passed it on to the police, and their response was essentially to laugh and say that this was all part of the hoax, that Denise and Aaron were just playing everyone, taking photos and sending emails to make it look like they had been kidnapped, or like Denise had been kidnapped. Now, the kidnappers then sent another email, but this time to Kenny Park, a lieutenant at the Vallejo Police Department who had been going on air and discussing the case with the media. He had repeatedly, at this point, said that Denise and Aaron were not victims and that they were lying about the entire thing. The email said, the Vallejo Police Department has 24 hours to issue a full and unequivocal apology, one that includes the words, "we were wrong," or something very close to them. No mealy-mouthed, "it appears we may have initially misassessed the available evidence due to the complex and bizarre nature of the crime and the unusual behavior of the victims in delaying the reports and retaining attorneys instead of working directly with police. It will be a full apology, with zero insinuation that the victims had any role whatsoever in creating their predicament. I've spent time doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons. If you force it, I will do the wrong thing for the right reasons. No, not another kidnapping. You will see. There will be a lag before you find out, but after 24 hours, it will be in motion if there is no full apology. We may not be the direct agent of harm, but it will be made crystal clear that the Vallejo Police Department and you, Mr. Park, had every opportunity to stop it. You have more than enough information at this point to do the right thing and issue an apology to the victims. You have until noon tomorrow to make that happen. Now, I find it very interesting that there's a change in pronouns here. The previous emails said we, and now we get a few I's before it goes back to we. This may mean something, but it may not. But we're going to discuss that a little bit later in the video. And obviously, I think it seems that these emails made the police think that this was even more of a hoax, because, again, what kidnapper would send this to the police department in regards to the kidnappers, right? Or that those being kidnapped. You would think that those being kidnapped, if it was a hoax, would probably want to clear their name and send an email like this, right? It just really adds to the whole situation. Now, the next day, another email apologizing for the ultimatum was received, but it still requested an apology to the victims. Here's part of what it said. Stop persecuting her. I don't think you will find us, but if you do, good work. You may already have done one of us in. Another has had a nervous breakdown. But for my part, you definitely have me looking over my shoulder and jumping at shadows. I think I'll only find peace if I move to the middle of nowhere or go overseas and teach English or some such. If you do manage to pull me out of a hole someday, good job, well played. I'm not going to hurt anybody, but depending on where I am at the moment in time, I might have another spray-painted squirt gun. Or maybe it will be a real gun, empty. Or maybe not empty. Don't think too hard about that. Just aim true and get it done. If it ever comes to that. Really? Jumping at shadows? Because apparently the cops have done such a bang-up job so far. I'm not sure what the true intent is here because it's such an odd email. The police think it's a hoax, so why is he so paranoid, or why are they so paranoid that they might be caught? What they're doing right now is going to increase the chance they're going to get caught, unless it's a hoax. It's completely bizarre. The thing is the emails did not get the written intended result. No apology was issued, and the media continued to crucify Aaron and Denise. At this point, the entire case was being called the Gone Girl case, which, if you haven't seen Gone Girl, 10 out of 10, recommend. Love that movie and plan on reading the book. And weirdly, Denise does actually look like the actress in Gone Girl, which is just a crazy coincidence. This entire situation actually is actually very similar to the Gone Girl movie. But again, coincidence. Or not? We'll continue. So, some intelligent people had their doubts of this whole situation. Was it really a hoax? And more specifically, a very intelligent detective, Misty Karasu, had her doubts. See, on June 5th, 2015, almost 3 months after Denise's kidnapping, there was a home invasion in Dublin, California. At 3 a.m, a couple, Chung Yen and Lin Yen, were woken up by a flashlight and lasers shining in their face. A masked man dressed in black was standing at the edge of their bed and said, "We have your daughter, and she's safe." Kelly, the daughter, was in the bedroom across the hall. As the intruder leaned over to zip-tie Chung, he retaliated, and the intruder and him started a fight. As that went down, Lynn grabbed her phone and locked herself in the bathroom to call 911.
County emergency.
We had a break-in. They are out there right now. My husband's fighting with them. I just broke loose. I will hide in the bathroom right now.
He's run away already.
He ran away. Okay, my husband is bleeding.
The intruder then took off down the stairs and sprinted out the house. Once at the scene, the police found zip ties, a black glove, black duct tape, and a cell phone the intruder had left behind. Whoops. The police traced the phone number to a cabin that sat on a residential street in South Lake Tahoe. The police then went to the cabin, broke down the front door, and had to shove through a barricade of chairs to even get inside. The entire house was a total mess. In the living room, there was a set of crutches, multiple license plates, clothing, electronics, and a massage table. In the kitchen, there were empty boxes, open bottles of wine, and cans of spray paint. The police also found a black ski mask, black duct tape, and mismatched black gloves. A stun gun was found sitting on a rocking chair. There were walkie-talkies, a radar detector, zip ties, a rope, a device for replicating keys, makeup brushes, a partly empty bottle of NyQuil, hair dye, a spiked dog training collar, a penis pump, and more. It was a weird collection of stuff, to say the least. Some would say creepy. And they actually found the suspect there as well, who didn't even put up a fight and was handcuffed, led to a patrol car, and taken from the scene. Later that same day, the detective and her colleagues drove to a tow yard and searched a stolen white Mustang that had been recovered near the cabin. Inside, they found items that could be linked to the Dublin break-in, like 2 gloves matching one from the crime scene, receipts for a flashlight, a speaker, and zip ties that had been purchased near Dublin the night before the home invasion. They also found burglary tools and a metal flashlight. Among these more promising findings, they found a plethora of weird shit that didn't match the Dublin crime. For example, one of the car's most recent destinations on the GPS showed an address in Huntington Beach, which is 400 miles south of Lake Tahoe. How odd. A blood pressure cuff, a camouflage tarp, a BB gun that had been painted black, and a blow-up doll in black clothing, rigged with wiring so it looked like it could stand up or sit down, so it could look like a human. Something that really stood out to the detective was when she found 2 pairs of Speedo swim goggles. One had black duct tape over the lenses and a long strand of blonde hair caught in the tape. Whose hair was that, she wondered. Is there another victim? Is she alive? Now, the suspect, turns out, he was a former Marine, a Harvard Law School alum, had worked in the Immigration and Refugee Clinical Program after graduating, and had been a lawyer at a big law firm. According to one person who worked with him, he was warm, caring, earnest, smart, enthusiastic, engaging, thoughtful, and he was a super good human being. His name was Matthew Muller, and he has a very interesting and complicated history, which we're going to dive into right now. See, Muller grew up in the suburbs of Sacramento, California. His mother, Joyce, was a middle school English teacher, and his father, Monty, was a school administrator and wrestling coach. His family spent their summers hiking in the Sierra Nevada, relaxing at a lakeside cabin in Michigan, or abalone diving in Bodega Bay. So in other words, he grew up pretty normal. Some would say he was privileged. Muller was considered a strong-willed, introverted child, and he preferred to run, walk, ski, or just interact with the family dog alone, over all other things. He played trumpet in the school band and loved dystopian novels by George Orwell and Aldous Huxley. During his senior year in high school, he decided to enlist in the Marines. Now, his time in the Marines was intense and difficult. Within the first 13 weeks, he lost more than 50 pounds. He didn't go out with his platoon on weekend outings, and for a while, he lived off of Powerade and garlic rice. That's it. According to those that worked with him, he had a deadpan demeanor and disliked individuals who preyed on the weak. In other words, he hated bullies. Muller played trumpet in the Marine Corps band at bases in California and Japan. He started a nonprofit to teach locals about the internet, and in 1999, he deployed to train soldiers in the Middle East. Now, back in California, he attended Pomona College, where he was involved in volunteer work, including helping homeless people secure government benefits and running an outdoor program. He met his wife in 2001, and shortly after he graduated from Pomona, they got married. In 2003, they moved to Boston, where he started Harvard Law School. After graduating from law school, he stayed at Harvard to teach and work in the Immigration and Refugee Clinical Program. But despite all of his success, Muller was struggling. In the summer of 2008, Muller revealed to his parents that he had bipolar disorder. Apparently, Muller had struggled with disturbing thoughts since his time in the Marines. As a result, he had requested a discharge. Over the years, Muller saw multiple psychiatrists, with one diagnosing him with major depression and showing signs of mania. Although Muller tried medication, he stopped because he didn't like the side effects. He also struggled with delusions, and one in particular occurred while he was working at Harvard. He became convinced the government was tapping his phone and hacking his computer, largely because some of his clients had been accused of having links to terrorists. He eventually left New England in the hopes of avoiding its harsh winters, and he gave up asylum law for patent litigation. In 2009, him and his wife moved to Silicon Valley, where he started working at a big law firm. Unfortunately, things only got worse from there, because he became. That being said, he quickly began taking antidepressants, which helped with his ideations, but caused insomnia. Around this time, he started hearing voices that kept a running commentary of all of his faults. To quiet those voices and tire himself out enough to sleep, he would go on long walks at night. A 2009 incident really alerted his wife to Muller's internal struggles. In January of that year, Muller had disappeared along with his bike and the SUV he had borrowed from his mom. He had left his wife a note that said, "I'm going completely off the grid. No phone, email, credit cards, etc. So please do not try to track me as it will only draw attention." Shortly after, she received a scheduled email saying that he was running from people waging psychological warfare against him. He said, "This is perhaps the least extreme thing I can do to resolve it that does not also expose everyone to criminal liability." His wife reported him missing, and his dad and brother drove to Yosemite National Park, one of his favorite spots, in search of him. When looking at his recent purchases, Mueller's wife found that he had bought over 80 items in the last 2 weeks, such as a tarp, a solar shower, water carriers, a survival guide, an axe, mosquito nets, etc. He had likely hid these items in the garage for weeks while planning his disappearance and off-the-grid lifestyle. Eventually, Mueller told his wife he was hiding out just outside Zion National Park in Utah, and she went to pick him up. Following this situation, there was a series of Mueller getting better and then getting worse. There were times where he had a grip on reality, and other times where he completely lost it. Eventually, in 2012, his wife filed for divorce. They quickly signed a settlement where she agreed to pay Mueller $3,400 a month in alimony. In later court filings, she stated that she'd accepted those terms only because Mueller had continuously pressured and intimidated her. She claimed he had told her he'd hacked her computer and was using surveillance to keep track of her actions, and that he was going to use his immigration expertise and contacts to get her and her family deported. Mueller's ex also said that, during the divorce proceedings, she found out that Mueller had faked documents while they were married and had her as a co-signer on a car loan. He then threatened to destroy her and her family if she reported the fraud. During the time she was paying alimony, she was late one time, and he wrote to her, "You are going to be responsible for losing your job, losing your license, and the suffering that will bring your family." Mueller has essentially denied all of these allegations made by his wife. Okay, now let's get back to the crime investigation in 2015. Mueller was in custody for the event that occurred in Dublin, but the detective, Karasu, was convinced he was connected to multiple other crimes. So she began digging around in the police database, both using Matthew Mueller's name and also just investigating similar crimes, and she found a lot of bad stuff. His name yielded a hit for an unsolved 2009 break-in at an apartment complex called College Terrace near Stanford. A 32-year-old woman was sleeping in her apartment when a man jumped on top of her. She reported that he appeared to be in his 20s, was white, tall, and lean. He wore a mask, black gloves, and black clothing. This man tied her hands behind her, bound her ankles, and covered her eyes with tape. She was then forced to drink NyQuil. Before the NyQuil hit, the man gathered personal information and tried to assault her. She fought back and made up a story about having been assaulted in high school, and he stopped, claiming that he didn't want to victimize her again. Because I guess the first time's okay in his eyes, but no more than that. He then left. Police officers had connected this woman with Mueller because they came across him walking late at night in the vicinity of the crime. After some research, they discovered that she had attended an event that Mueller had organized at Harvard the previous year. Mueller was identified as the primary suspect, but there was no DNA match, and law enforcement didn't charge Mueller because there was a lack of evidence. The detective also found that the Dublin home invasion had parallels to 2 other unsolved crimes in Silicon Valley. A month prior to the College Terrace incident, another woman in Mountain View woke up at 5 a.m. to find a man on top of her. She described him as white and slim, 6 feet tall, and wearing black tight clothing with a ski mask. When she started screaming, he put his hand over her mouth and told her he was part of a group of criminals that were going to steal her identity and wire money abroad. He then bound her ankles and her hands, placed blacked out swim goggles over her eyes, and forced her to drink cough syrup. He eventually told her he had to assault her, but she begged him not to, and I guess he listened, because he didn't. The woman told Dateline that when she called the Mountain View police, they initially suggested that she might have just had a bad dream. That being said, they did end up investigating and concluded that the person behind this attack was also likely behind the College Terrace attack. That being said, in this case, Mueller was not named as a suspect. The last case the detective discovered had happened 3 years after the other two, in November of 2012. A woman in her mid-20s who lived north of the Stanford campus woke at 2:20 in the morning to see a masked man in gloves and dark clothing standing at the foot of her bed. He held her down, but she screamed and fought back. He eventually gave up and fled. Mueller was not named a suspect in that case. The detective made some other additional eerie discoveries as she was doing her research. She called the owner of the stolen Mustang. He was a medical student who lived on the outskirts of Mare Island, which is 40 miles northwest of Dublin. In January of 2015, he had returned home to find that someone had taken his car keys from his home and driven his Mustang right out the garage. During their conversation, he asked the detective if she'd heard of the Mare Island Creep, who's known as a neighborhood peeping Tom. Between August 2014 and January 2015, a minimum of 4 women on Mare Island had reported seeing a creepy man looking through their windows or climbing their roof. One reported he was taking pictures of her. Some of the women described him as a white man, 25 to 35, wearing a black jacket. Now, after all this research, Karasu was starting to see the patterns and connect the dots. She had also heard of the hoax or the Gone Girl case down in Vallejo, and she noted the similarities between her case and the other cases and what had happened in Vallejo. And more specifically, she could not shake the memory of the blonde hair being stuck to one of the goggles found at Muller's cabin. Karasu called the Vallejo police and told them it may not be a hoax, that this could actually have been a kidnapping. But Karasu reported finding the detective on the case as dismissive. She eventually was rerouted to the FBI, who had taken over the investigation and provided them with the evidence from their Dublin case. According to the lead detective on the Dublin case, Miguel Campos, the FBI agents who saw the evidence responded with something similar to, "Oh shit." Yeah, they realized that they had overlooked some key things. Turns out, Denise and Aaron's story was not fake. Aaron's home had been broken into. Denise had been taken to the cabin. She'd been assaulted twice. And it was all at the hands of Muller and maybe some other people. But again, we're going to get into that later. In July of 2015, around 4 months after the kidnapping, Denise and Aaron faced the media.
Today is a terrific day for them. That doesn't mean that they didn't suffer the ordeal that they went through. This changes nothing about the humiliation, the violence that was perpetrated on them nearly 4 months ago by a psychopath.
And it wasn't until several days later that the Vallejo police retracted their claim that the kidnapping was even staged. And they didn't issue a public apology until 6 years later. Side note, Denise and Aaron sued the city in a defamation case, and it was settled outside of court for $2.5 million. So, they got their upcomings or comeuppance. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, Denise and Aaron had gone through literal hell, not only from what Muller had done to them, but also what the police department, the media, and the public did to them. A lot had happened, but here are a few examples of what they went through. During Aaron's first interrogation, the detectives had asked him to strip down naked and change into striped prison pants, claiming that was all they had on hand. They then questioned him in a room with no clock or windows and spent hours pressuring him to confess to killing Denise. At one point, he crawled into the fetal position and cried.
You want me to go tell her family that she's dead? Because that's what I'm prepared to do. I'm going to go tell them that I'm not looking for alive Denise, I'm looking for dead Denise.
In another instance, when Denise's mother told the lead detective, Matthew Mustard, that Denise had been assaulted as a child, he apparently responded by saying that people who'd been assaulted at a young age often wanted to relive the thrill, essentially insinuating she was lying about being kidnapped because she wanted to relive the thrill of the trauma she faced as a child. In addition, when Denise's lawyer contacted Vallejo police to request a forensic exam, they were allegedly resistant to it and doubted the fact that she had even been assaulted. The exam wasn't conducted until 14 hours later, only after they forced Denise to undergo a long and emotional interrogation. And although the nurses noticed bruises on her back and elbow, it took months before the results of that exam even came in. Finally, turns out, those calls the robbers made to Aaron's phone while it was on airplane mode, they were traced back to the South Lake Tahoe cabin. Meaning, if the police had taken Aaron's story even a little seriously and kept the phone on and traced the calls, they could have rescued Denise and saved her from being assaulted. But because they put it on airplane mode and kept their blinders on, they missed an opportunity to protect and save a victim. In September of 2015, Muller pleaded no contest to felony charges of burglary, attempted robbery, and assault with a deadly weapon in the Dublin break-in. In September 2016, he pleaded guilty to federal charges in the Vallejo case. The day of Muller's sentencing, both Aaron and Denise read victim statements. Denise looked Muller in the eyes and said, "I am Denise Huskins, the woman behind the blindfold." She continued on to call Muller calculated and strategic, and said that he kept his true intentions and motivations to himself, knowing how awful they were. She saw his mental health issues as excuses and claimed that her experience made her certain that Muller had willingly and thoughtfully participated in this hell we have survived. Muller watched and listened with no emotional expression. He then made a brief statement from his seat. "I'm sick with shame that my actions have brought such devastation. I hope my imprisonment can bring closure to Aaron and Denise, and I'm prepared for any sentence the court imposes. And that was it. He was then sentenced to 40 years in prison. In 2020, Mueller was deemed incompetent to stand trial and was moved to a state psychiatric hospital where he received a new diagnosis, schizophrenia. In March of 2022, after Mueller was deemed competent, he pleaded no contest to all state charges, and he was sentenced to 31 years to be served concurrently. And now, we're going to tie up some of the loose ends I mentioned at the beginning of this video, because in 2024, Mueller confessed to additional prior crimes that he committed. First, he confessed to being the perpetrator in a cold case from 1993. He used a gun to threaten 2 young campers near Folsom Lake. He forced them out of their tent, and he then tied up the male camper and took the woman away to assault her. Mueller was 16 years old at the time. He also confessed to a 2015 Contra Costa County kidnapping for a ransom crime, as well as confessed to 2 other home invasions in Santa Clara County. At this point, he has received multiple life terms. Now, there's been a lot of controversy over whether Mueller acted alone or in concert with other criminals. Aaron and Denise are positive there were other people in the room the day Mueller broke in and tied them up. Among other things, Aaron said that when Mueller was physically near both of them, they heard the sounds and felt the vibrations of kitchen cabinets opening and closing. In a court filing, federal prosecutors insisted that Mueller used elaborate artifice to convince his victims that he was just one member of a professional crew. They used the fact that he had a blow-up doll that could sit or stand up, a portable speaker, and audio recordings of several people whispering to support this conclusion. At one point, Mueller's mother asked him, while he was in jail, if he'd committed Denise's kidnapping alone. According to his mother, he nodded, but then reminded her that their call was being recorded. In other instances, though, Mueller has repeatedly said he acted alone. We also have evidence in his email where he bounces between saying I and we. Was he accidentally confusing the pronouns because in reality he was lying about there being a we? Was this his mental illness showing through? Was he bouncing between a reality where it was just him versus where it was a group of people? Or was he sometimes speaking for himself while other times speaking for his conspirators? To this day, I don't think we have a concrete answer. And I'd be surprised if we ever do have one. Although we have solved multiple mysteries related to this case, it seems there are many more. So, with all that, that's where we are. Sitting here probably with mixed emotions following a very long and complicated story. And actually, I wasn't even able to cover absolute everything. The story and Mueller's history, it's so complex and has so many unexpected turns that I couldn't cover it all. And I highly encourage you to check it out and do some additional research, if you're interested in it. And given the complexity of this case, we are left with a lot of questions. Did Mueller operate alone? Has he committed other crimes that he just hasn't admitted to yet? And what about overseas jurisdiction? Did he commit crimes in other countries while he was in the Marines? And a big one is, how much does his mental illness play into his actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case, your answers to any of these questions, or maybe you just want to pop in and say hi. I'd love that too. And until next time, enjoy the weekend and stay safe.